Hey scholars, welcome to chapter 3. This is the overview of ecosystems in the ecology section. This is a very basic overview. We're going to fly through it. Again, it's chapter 3, very simple stuff that you probably already have known about with a little bit of biology and your little background in ecology from your biology days. So we're looking at ecosystems. One of the ecosystems of the core case study talked about, we kind of skip over this as far as the circle up goes, but the case study is on the tropical rainforest, and it's a very valuable ecosystem from the ecology standpoint. It covers about 2% of the Earth's land surface. It contains up to 50% of the world's known plant animal species, so very diverse ecosystem. Disruption will have three major harmful effects. Number one, obviously reduction of biodiversity. That's the number of different species in a given area. Accelerating global warming. How would this occur? Well, global warming, obviously, trees are a good CO2 holder. They're a sink for carbon. And so when they can't do their job if they're cut down, that CO2 goes in the atmosphere, which increases global warming and increases the global temperature. Change in regional weather patterns. Trees, if you notice, actually can divert winds, act as barriers to things, and also cool climates and things like that. So change the regional weather patterns. If you take a whole forest out of the picture, will definitely change the shape of wind patterns as well as of climate as well. So there's just a little satellite image of the lost tropical rainforest, mostly due to, if you look at this, farming, taking out all those trees for the nutrients in the soil and kind of clearing those out for farming for that area. All right, that's there for a case study. We're looking at what is ecology. It's kind of the basic of all this deal. And first we got to start with the smallest part of it all, which are cells. Those are the basic units of life. And the cell theory, you should be able to name this from biology days. The parts are that all cells are made up, the cells are the basic units of life. All living things are made up of cells, and cells produce cells from other cells. So those are kind of our three basic parts to cell theory. So all living things are made up of cells, cells basic unit of life, and that all cells come from pre-existing cells. This is made famous from Schleiden, Schwann, and Virchow, the three scientists that helped create this theory. Eukaryotic cell characteristics, they obviously have a nucleus and have membrane-bound organelles, whereas prokaryotes do not. Eukaryotes have helical DNA, and prokaryotes have circular DNA in the form of plasmid DNA. Examples would be humans for eukaryotes and bacteria for prokaryotes. And here's a couple pictures there, just showing you the nucleus, protein construction there, the cell membrane, energy conversion with the membrane-bound mitochondria. DNA has no nucleus, but does have some DNA, kind of not helical, but circular DNA, kind of free-floating in the cytoplasm, and some protein construction out in the cytoplasm as well. All right, so species make up the encyclopedia of life. So again, speciation is creation of new species. There have been 1.75 million species that have been identified. Good number to know. Insects make up most of the species, and perhaps 10 to 14 million species haven't even been identified yet. So that's kind of a lot. We only scratched the surface as far as species identification goes. Ecologists study connections in nature. So the ecology itself is kind of the intertwinedness of non-living and living components of an ecosystem intertwining and reacting and living amongst one another. That's just the living, but existing and reacting to one another. Levels of organization, we go from the smallest, which is obviously the organism, to a bunch of the same organism making up a population, which has some genetic diversity to it. A bunch of population make up a community, a bunch of community make up an ecosystem, a bunch of ecosystems make up a biosphere. And you can see that on this image right here, the biosphere being the top, and atom, all the way down to atom, I guess. There's organisms, so you can even go smaller, cell, molecule, and atom, going all the way up to what we just kind of talked about. This is just an image of some Caribbean snails that obviously have different genetic diversity within a population to give them different looks, even though they are members of the same species and can interbreed and produce fertile offspring. All right, so science-focused section on your book. It talks about have you thanked the insects today. Insects are a huge part. Obviously, they make up a number of the diversity of species, but they are pollinators. The majority of them are. They like to eat other insects, which keeps some of the bad insects. They're not really bad, but some of the ones that we don't like down. Loosen and renew soil. They reproduce rapidly, which makes them very prone to lasting through tough, harsh environmental conditions, and very resistant to extinction because of a couple of those features. And there's a couple of our examples of insects, the monarch butterfly being a good pollinator, the praying mantis maybe eating some other insects that we would normally like to have around. Let's move on to section 3.2, where we're looking at what keeps us and other organisms actually alive. Very short section, but we'll talk about it today. First thing, that the Earth is what supports life, and the reason why Earth supports life is made up of 4 major components. One of those being the atmosphere. The part of the atmosphere that we're most familiar with is the troposphere. That's the livable one. That also helps us out because it keeps our temperature and our planet pretty consistent, is the ozone layer within the stratosphere, which is the second layer of the atmosphere. And the ozone, obviously, like I said, keeps that greenhouse effect going, keeps our temperature relatively constant here on Earth instead of having drastic changes in temperature. The hydrosphere is, well, obviously the water part of land, hence the prefix hydro, geo, land, so the land portion, and then obviously bio meaning life, is the other part. So there's 4 major components to making up the Earth's life support system: the atmosphere, hydrosphere, geosphere, and biosphere. Let's take a look at the geosphere, kind of where all these kind of things are made up and where they're located. If you look at all this, the biosphere is all kind of the surface of, I guess if it's within the Earth's surface and within the crust, it is still living as well. That would be considered biosphere. The hydrosphere is all the water maintained in liquid form on the Earth's surface. We obviously have our geosphere, which makes up the crust, mantle, and core. That's that there. And then obviously, what was our last one? Oh, the atmosphere, which you can't really see here, but you can see in this little splice here. It does contain a little water, but it does have atmosphere, which is mostly made up of gases. And again, that is kind of how that whole thing shakes down as far as our living, what helps us to sustain life. Life exists on land and in water. Biomes are one of those ones that we'll talk about briefly here in a little bit. There are some different ones. There's the aquatic life zones or aquatic biomes, like the freshwater ones with lakes and streams. There's also marine life zones, which are coral reefs, estuaries, deep ocean. Those are a couple of our different types of aquatic life zones. You can see some of the major biomes along the 39th parallel in the U.S., which is kind of a majority of where we lie. There's Baltimore there. There's Appalachian Mountains. We're somewhere in here. You can see San Francisco obviously has a chaparral, coastal chaparral and scrub area. Coniferous, kind of in the Sierra Nevada mountains. The Great American Desert is obviously the desert. Coniferous forests in the Rocky Mountains. The Great Plains and the have the prairie grasslands. And then the Appalachian Mountains, we have the deciduous forests. So that's kind of the major biomes, at least in our area. But there are other ones that we'll talk about as well. All right, so 3 factors sustain life on Earth, and one of them is the one-way flow of high-quality energy beginning with the sun, and as it is transferred, it becomes lower-quality energy. A lot of the loss, and I don't want to say loss like it disappears, it's just transformed. The reason why it becomes lower-quality energy is that some of that energy is lost as heat in the form of reactions and metabolic processes. How much is passed on to the trophic levels? Well, majority of you would say, oh, 10%, I remember this from biology, 90% is lost as heat through metabolic pathways. But it definitely changes depending on the amount of nutrients and type of ecosystem that the organism or that food chain or food web is actually in. So we're gonna come back to this topic, but for majority, that 10% rule is usually applies here. But we're gonna add a little bit to that. We're gonna change the dynamics of it a little bit. Cycling of matter or nutrients. Earth is a closed system. Without cycling, the Earth wouldn't really sustain life at all. It would be kind of just, we live for a little while and then we die and then nothing else happens. So that would be kind of a bad thing if the cycling of matter nutrients did not occur. And gravity, why is this important? Well, I'm going to go back a few slides to this guy. What the gravity does is holds the larger particles towards the middle and the mantle, and then the lighter particles, or the less weight particles, again, move away from that. So that's kind of left us with the layers that you see today, which has helped shape life today as well. So that's why gravity is important. Also keeps everybody on the planet, kind of keeps everything in a closed system as well. All right, so what happens to solar energy reaching the Earth? This is our last part to this little section. Obviously, it comes in the form of UV light, visible light, and infrared radiation light, or energy, I should say. A lot of it is absorbed by the ozone layer. Some of it's absorbed by the Earth. Some of it's reflected back off the surface of the Earth. Some of it's actually radiated by the atmosphere as heat. So all of that, so we don't never get 100% of the energy from the sun, but we do absorb some of that's allowing us to sustain life here on Earth. This brings us to the greenhouse effect, which is a good thing. I don't want you to think greenhouse effect is a bad thing. It is, kind of goes with global warming a little bit, but global warming is like enhanced greenhouse effect, which greenhouse effect itself is a good thing, keeps our atmosphere at a relatively, in our area on Earth, relatively constant temperature for the most part. So you can see the different solar radiation coming out. Some of it's reflected by our atmosphere. Some of it's actually, most of it's absorbed by the ozone layer. Some of it actually is absorbed by the Earth's surface. And some of it actually is released, or I should say, bouncing off the Earth's surface and then heat radiated by the Earth. Some of it goes out of the atmosphere, some of it's trapped by the ozone layer. Either way, that really forms the greenhouse effect. All right? That brings us to the end of section 3.2. We'll see you guys next time, where next time we're going to discuss what are the major components of an ecosystem, biotic, abiotic living things in our ecosystems, and we'll talk more about nutrients as well. See you guys next time.